Look at me when I'm speaking to you. Your service ended decades ago, old man. Now you're just causing a disturbance.
The Marine captain's hand froze mid-air, inches from the old man's faded patch. 3 words had just escaped those weathered lips, words that shouldn't exist outside classified files buried 40 years deep. Iron Viper. The name hit the lobby like a grenade. Within 60 seconds, a 2-star general would crash through those doors, trembling. Within 5 minutes, a cocky young officer's world would shatter. But right now, in this breath between arrogance and reckoning, nobody knew they were standing face to face with a ghost the Pentagon thought was dead. Before we dive into this story, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. You won't want to miss how this unfolds. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let's get into it. Captain Kyle Evans stood in the center of the Grand Majestic Hotel lobby like he owned it. "Check this out," he said to Lieutenant Marcus Webb, nodding toward the entrance. "Someone's lost grandpa just wandered in." Webb looked. An old man shuffled through the revolving doors, one gnarled hand gripping the arm of a young woman in her 20s. The old man wore a brown leather jacket that looked like it had survived a war, probably because it had. His steps were careful, measured, like every movement cost him something. "Should we call security?" Webb asked. "Nah." Evans grinned. "Let me handle this. Could be fun." The old man, James O'Donnell, though Evans didn't know that yet, made his way toward the registration desk. The young woman, his granddaughter Lily, guided him gently. She whispered something in his ear. He nodded, but didn't respond. Evans intercepted them before they reached the desk. "Excuse me." He stepped directly into their path. "Can I help you folks?" Lily looked up at him. Her eyes were dark, protective. "We're here for the Marine Corps ball. My grandfather was invited." Evans looked the old man up and down. 86, if he was a day. Thin. Fragile. The jacket hung loose on his frame. His left hand trembled constantly, some kind of palsy, probably. His eyes were distant, unfocused, like he was looking at something nobody else could see. "Invited," Evans repeated. He smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "By whom?" "General Morrison." That made Evans pause, but only for a second. "General Morrison personally invited?" He gestured vaguely at the old man. "Him?" "Yes." "I see. And you have the invitation?" Lily's jaw tightened. "It's at home. We didn't think we'd need to bring it." "Ah." Evans rocked back on his heels. Behind him, Webb and 2 other junior officers had drifted closer, sensing entertainment. "Well, that's unfortunate, because this is a secure event. Marines only, active duty and verified veterans. My grandfather is a veteran." "I'm sure he is, ma'am. I'm sure he served with distinction, but without documentation, his name should be on the list." Evans turned to the registration desk where a young private first class sat with a tablet. "Hey, Marine, check your list for..." He looked back at Lily, eyebrows raised. "James O'Donnell," she said through clenched teeth. The private scrolled through his tablet, frowned, scrolled some more. "Sir, I'm not seeing that name." Evans spread his hands. "There you go. Not on the list." "That's impossible," Lily said. Her voice was rising. A few people nearby were starting to glance over. "The invitation came directly from the general's office 3 weeks ago. Maybe there was a mistake. Maybe it got lost in the mail. Maybe..." Evans leaned in slightly, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Maybe your grandfather got a little confused. Happens at that age. Memory plays tricks." Lily's face flushed red. "He is not confused." "Ma'am, I'm not trying to be disrespectful." "Then stop being disrespectful." Evans straightened up, his smile vanishing. "I'm doing my job. This is a Marine Corps function. Security protocols exist for a reason. If his name's not on the list and you don't have physical documentation, I can't let you in. Those are the rules." "The rules." Lily's hands were shaking now. One still held her grandfather's arm. The other had curled into a fist at her side. "He served this country. He fought for it. and you're going to stand there and tell me he can't attend a ball because of paperwork. I'm telling you he can't attend because I have no way to verify his service. Evans's voice had gone flat, professional, the voice of someone who'd made a decision and wasn't going to be moved. Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but I need you to step aside so other guests can check in. We're not moving. Evans's eyes narrowed. Excuse me. I said we're not moving. Not until you call General Morrison's office and confirm my grandfather's invitation. The general's office is closed. It's Saturday evening. Then call his aide. I don't have his aide's number. Then find someone who does. They were locked now, eyes fixed on each other, neither willing to give ground. The old man between them stood silent, swaying slightly. His distant eyes tracked across the lobby, seeing things that weren't there. Or maybe things that used to be there. His lips moved soundlessly, forming words nobody could hear. Evans looked at him again, really looked. The trembling hand, the vacant stare, the way he seemed to barely be present. And something mean flickered through Evans's chest. Something that whispered, "This is sad. This is pathetic. This old man has no business being here." "Ma'am," Evans said, his voice softening into something that sounded like sympathy but wasn't quite. "I can see your grandfather means a lot to you. I can see you want to do right by him. But look at him. Really look at him. Does he even know where he is right now? Does he understand what's happening?" Lily's eyes went wide. "How dare you? I'm being honest. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for our elderly loved ones is protect them from situations that might be overwhelming, confusing. This is a loud event. Lots of people, lots of stimulation. Maybe it would be better for everyone if you took him home, made him comfortable, let him rest." "You don't get to tell me what's better for my grandfather. I'm just saying. You're just saying he's too old, too broken, too embarrassing to be here." Lily's voice cracked. "You looked at him and decided he wasn't worth your time, wasn't worth the effort of making a phone call, because he's old and he shakes and he doesn't look like the Marines in your recruiting posters." Evans felt his face heat. "That's not what I said." "It's what you meant." Webb stepped forward, trying to diffuse. "Hey, let's all just take a breath here. Stay out of this, Marcus," Evans snapped. Then to Lily. "You want to know what I think? I think you're using him, parading him around, trying to get attention, trying to score points by dragging an old veteran to a ball where he doesn't want to be so you can feel good about yourself." The slap came out of nowhere. Lily's palm cracked across Evans's cheek with a sound like a gunshot. The lobby went silent. Every head turned. Evans's hand shot out on instinct. He grabbed her wrist, hard, too hard. His training kicked in control. The threat neutralized the attacker. His fingers dug into her skin. "Let go of her." The voice was quiet, barely audible, but it cut through the silence like a blade. Everyone looked at the old man. James O'Donnell's eyes had changed. They weren't distant anymore. They were focused, locked on Evans's hand where it gripped his granddaughter's wrist. And in those pale blue eyes, something ancient and terrible had woken up. "Let go," James said again. His voice was still quiet, but there was iron underneath it. Command. Absolute. And unquestionable. Evans hesitated. The rational part of his brain was screaming at him to release her, to step back, to de-escalate. But his pride had taken over. He was a Marine captain. He wasn't going to be ordered around by some confused old man who didn't even know what year it was. "Sir, you need to control your granddaughter before—" James moved. 1 second he was standing there, swaying and trembling. The next second his right hand, the one that wasn't shaking, had locked onto Evan's wrist like a steel trap. The pain was instant and shocking. Evans gasped and tried to pull away, but he couldn't move, couldn't budge. The old man's grip was iron, unbreakable, the kind of grip that came from a body that remembered things the mind had filed away. James pulled, gently, but with such absolute certainty that Evans had no choice but to release Lily's wrist and stumble forward off balance. They were face to face now, close enough that Evans could see the old scars on James's neck, could smell the old man's smell of soap and age, could see the way James's pupils had dilated like his body was flooding with chemicals it hadn't produced in decades. "Don't," James said softly. "Touch her again." Then he let go and stepped back. His hand immediately started trembling again. His eyes went distant. Whatever had surfaced was sinking back down into deep water, but it had been there. Evans had seen it, had felt it. Webb grabbed Evans's shoulder and pulled him back. "Jesus, Kyle, come on, this is getting out of hand." Evans looked at his wrist. There were red marks there, finger-shaped, deep. He flexed his hand and winced. A man in a suit pushed through the crowd. 50s built like a tank with a security badge clipped to his pocket. "Miller." "What's going on here?" he demanded. Evans opened his mouth, but Lily beat him to it. "This captain," she said, her voice shaking with rage, "has been harassing my grandfather, mocking him, questioning his service. He grabbed me when I tried to defend him, and now he's going to make up some story about how we're the problem." Miller looked at Evans. "Is that true, Captain? It's more complicated than that. Is it true you grabbed her? She slapped me first. And before that," Evans hesitated. Miller's eyes hardened. "Before that, Captain, what happened?" I was enforcing security protocols. Their name wasn't on the list. I asked for documentation. They didn't have any. I told them they couldn't enter without verification. And then she got upset, started accusing me of..." Evans stopped, looked at the crowd watching him, looked at Webb's disappointed face, looked at the old man who was staring at nothing again, trembling. "Started accusing you of what?" Miller pressed. Evans's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Of being disrespectful." Miller studied him for a long moment. Then he turned to James. "Sir, may I see your jacket?" James didn't respond. Lily answered for him. "Why?" "I need to see the patch on his shoulder." Lily looked confused, but she gently guided James to turn slightly. Miller stepped close and examined the faded patch on the brown leather. His face went pale. "Oh no," he breathed. "What?" Evans asked. "What is it?" Miller pulled out his phone with shaking hands. He stepped away, pressing it to his ear. His voice was urgent, barely controlled. "Colonel Henderson, it's Miller. I need you in the lobby right now. We have a situation." A pause. "No, sir, not a threat. You need to see this for yourself, immediately." He hung up and turned back to James. "Sir, how old are you?" James's lips moved. 86. "When did you serve?" No answer. Miller's voice went softer. "Vietnam." The smallest nod. "What unit?" James's eyes flickered. For just a second they cleared, focused on Miller with an intensity that made the security chief step back. "That's classified," James whispered. Miller's face went from pale to gray. "Oh, Jesus Christ." Evans was getting frustrated. "Will someone please tell me what's going on?" Miller rounded on him, and the look on his face made Evans take a step back. "Captain, I strongly suggest you shut your mouth right now. Don't say another word. Don't move. Don't breathe loudly. Just stand there and pray you haven't just made the worst mistake of your career." "I don't understand." "That patch." Miller pointed at James's shoulder. "I've seen it exactly once before. 5 years ago. In a file I wasn't supposed to be reading. A classified file from the Vietnam War." He swallowed hard. "If that patch means what I think it means, if this man is who I think he is, then you just spent the last 15 minutes mocking and manhandling a decorated special operations veteran whose service record is so classified that most of it won't be declassified until 2060. The lobby had gone completely silent. Every eye was on Miller, on James, on the faded patch with its coiled shape and worn fangs. Evans felt something cold slide down his spine. What unit?" "I can't tell you that," Miller said. Because I don't have clearance, and neither do you. The elevator dinged. Colonel Thomas Henderson stepped out, moving fast. He was in his 50s with steel gray hair and 3 rows of ribbons on his dress blue uniform. His eyes swept the lobby, taking in the scene, the crowd, the security chief's pale face, the young captain who looked like he was about to be sick, and the old man in the leather jacket. Henderson stopped walking, just stopped like he'd hit an invisible wall. He stared at James for 5 full seconds. Then he crossed the remaining distance slowly, almost carefully, like he was approaching something dangerous. "Sir," he said quietly to James, "I'm Colonel Thomas Henderson. Can you state your name for me?" "James O'Donnell." "Service number?" James rattled off a string of numbers without hesitation. His voice was steady, clear. Whatever part of his brain stored those numbers was still sharp as a knife. Henderson pulled out his phone and typed them in. Waited. His face went through several expressions as he read whatever came up: confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally something that looked like horror. He lowered the phone slowly. "Captain Evans," he said, not looking away from James. "Come here." Evans walked forward on numb legs. "Tell me exactly what happened," Henderson said. His voice was very quiet, very controlled. Evans explained. The missing name on the list, the lack of documentation, his refusal to let them enter. He left out the parts about mockery, about dismissiveness, about grabbing Lily. He didn't have to. Lily filled in those gaps herself, her voice sharp and clear, detailing every word, every gesture, every contemptuous look. When she finished, Henderson closed his eyes. "Captain," he said slowly, "did you at any point physically touch this man or his granddaughter?" "Sir, she slapped me. I was just..." "Yes or no, Captain?" "Yes, sir." Henderson's jaw clenched so tight his teeth should have shattered. "Did you mock his service?" "I didn't. I suggested that maybe he was confused about..." "Did you question whether he deserved to be here?" Evans said nothing. "Did you suggest..." Henderson continued, his voice dropping even lower, that his granddaughter was using him for attention. Still nothing. Henderson opened his eyes. They were full of cold fire. "Captain Kyle Evans, do you know what MACV-SOG is?" "No, sir." "Military Assistance Command Vietnam, Studies and Observations Group. Special Operations, Unconventional Warfare, the most dangerous missions in the most hostile territory. They ran cross-border operations into Laos and Cambodia, deep penetration reconnaissance, prisoner snatches, assassinations, the kind of work that got men killed faster than anywhere else in the war." He paused. "The casualty rate was 75%. 3 out of every 4 men who joined SOG died or were captured. Most were never recovered." Evans felt his stomach drop. Henderson looked at James. "How long did you serve with SOG, sir?" James's voice was barely audible. 3 years. The lobby gasped. Someone whispered, "That's impossible." Henderson's voice was thick. 3 years. Jesus. That makes you... He did the math. "You're the longest-serving SOG operative I've ever heard of. The average was 6 months before death or injury forced rotation. 3 years is..." He shook his head. "That's not possible." "Wasn't easy," James whispered. "What team?" James's eyes found Henderson's, held them. The Vipers. Henderson's knees actually buckled. He caught himself on a nearby chair. Miller made a sound like he'd been punched. No, that's... The Vipers were a legend. They were ghosts. Nobody even knew if they really existed. "We existed," James said softly. "How many?" Henderson's voice was shaking. "How many missions? Classified. How many men in your unit? 15 at the start. How many survived?" James was quiet for a long moment. His hand found Lily's, squeezed it gently. "I'm standing here. So that's 1. The silence was absolute. Evans wanted to disappear, wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. He looked at his wrist at the red marks from James's grip and suddenly understood what he'd felt in that moment. Not an old man's strength, a killer's strength, a survivor's strength. The strength of someone who'd fought and bled and buried everyone he'd ever served with and kept on living anyway. "Oh God," Evans whispered. "Oh my God." Henderson didn't look at him. His eyes were still on James. "Sir General Morrison has been looking for you for 3 years. He wanted to honor you. He wanted to bring you and the other SOG survivors together to finally acknowledge what you did, what you sacrificed. To say thank you in a way that should have been said 50 years ago." James's eyes were wet now. "There are others. 4. We found 4 SOG survivors from various units. They're upstairs right now, waiting." Henderson's voice cracked. "They didn't know you were alive, sir. Most people thought the Vipers died to the last man in Laos in 1971. The mission reports were sealed. The records were classified. You were erased." "We knew we would be," James said. "We accepted it." "You shouldn't have had to." James just shook his head. "We did the job. That was enough." Henderson turned to Evans. The gentleness in his voice was gone, replaced by something that could have cut glass. "Captain, look at this man. Really look at him." Evans forced himself to meet James's distant gaze. "This man," Henderson said, "ran missions behind enemy lines where capture meant torture and execution. He watched 15 brothers die. He killed enemy soldiers with his bare hands. He was shot 4 times, knifed twice, and survived 3 helicopter crashes. He has more confirmed kills than you have days in service. He earned 3 Silver Stars, 2 Bronze Stars with V device, and a Navy Cross. All classified, all sealed, all invisible." Henderson stepped closer to Evans, close enough that Evans could smell his aftershave. "And you," Henderson said softly, mocked him, dismissed him, grabbed his granddaughter, treated him like a confused old man who wandered in off the street. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You want to know what that makes you, Captain?" Evans couldn't speak. "It makes you everything that's wrong with the Corps today. Everything we're trying to fix. You saw someone who didn't fit your image of what a warrior looks like, and you decided he was worthless. You saw weakness where there was only age. You saw confusion where there was exhaustion. You saw someone to push around instead of someone to honor." Tears were streaming down Evans's face now. He didn't even try to stop them. "Sir," he croaked, "I didn't know. I swear I didn't." "You didn't know because you didn't ask." Henderson's voice cracked like a whip. "You didn't make a phone call. You didn't double-check. You didn't give him the benefit of the doubt. You just decided he didn't belong and you made it your mission to humiliate him." "I'm sorry," Evans whispered. "God, I'm so sorry." Henderson looked at him with disgust. "Don't apologize to me. Apologize to him." Evans turned to James. The old man was watching him with those distant eyes. No anger, no hatred. Just a kind of sad understanding, like he'd seen this before. Like he knew how this ended. "Sir," Evans's voice broke completely. "I am so sorry. I was wrong. I was cruel. I was everything you fought to protect us from being, and I—" His voice gave out. He just stood there, tears running down his face, a Marine captain broken in front of a lobby full of witnesses. James watched him for a moment. Then slowly he raised one trembling hand and placed it on Evans's shoulder. "It's okay, son," he said softly. "You didn't know. How could you—" The mercy in those words was worse than any punishment. Evans nearly collapsed. The elevator dinged again. This time everyone knew what it meant. The crowd parted like water. General Marcus Morrison strode into the lobby with his aide trailing behind. He took in the scene at a glance, Henderson standing rigid, Miller pale and shaken, a young captain openly crying, and an old man in a leather jacket who looked like he might fall over at any second. Morrison's eyes locked onto James. He stopped, stood perfectly still. Then, with movements that were almost ceremonial, he came to attention. His right hand rose in a salute so sharp, so perfect, that it looked like it had been choreographed. The entire lobby held its breath. James stood there, swaying slightly, looking at the general with confusion in his eyes. Like he didn't understand what was happening. Like the world had shifted into something unfamiliar. Morrison held the salute. His arm didn't waver. His eyes never left James's face. "Grandpa," Lily whispered, "the general is saluting you." James blinked, looked at Morrison's raised hand. Something cleared in his eyes. Something clicked. Slowly, painfully slowly, he raised his own trembling right hand. It took him 3 tries to get it to his forehead. His arm shook violently. His hand barely stayed in place, but he held it there. Morrison's voice rang out clear and strong. "Iron Viper, on behalf of the United States Marine Corps and a grateful nation, I salute you, sir." The words echoed in the silent lobby. James's lips trembled. His eyes flooded with tears. His salute wavered and fell. Morrison held his for 5 more seconds. Then he dropped it and crossed the remaining distance in 3 strides. He stood in front of James, this 2-star general with 35 years of service, and his voice shook when he spoke. "Sir, I've been looking for you for 3 years. We all have. We wanted to bring you home. We wanted to honor you, to thank you, to tell you that what you did mattered, that you mattered." He swallowed hard, "that you weren't forgotten." James's voice was barely a whisper. I thought everyone was dead." "Not everyone, sir. 4 of your brothers are upstairs right now. 4 SOG operators from different units. They're alive, they're here, and they're waiting to meet you." James swayed. Lily caught him. Morrison reached out to steady him, but James waved him off. "I can walk," he said. "Just give me a second." He stood there breathing hard, one hand pressed to his chest. His eyes were distant again, but now it was clear he wasn't seeing nothing. He was seeing everything, every mission, every brother, every firefight and extraction and quiet moment in the jungle when they thought they'd never see home again. He was seeing the ghosts. "Are they real?" James asked. "The men upstairs. Are they really real?" "Yes, sir," Morrison said gently. "They're real. They're alive. And they want to see you." James nodded slowly. Then he looked at Lily. "Help me walk, honey. I need to see my boys." Morrison offered his arm. James took it with his right hand. Lily supported his left side. Together, the 3 of them moved toward the elevator. As they passed Evans, James stopped. He looked at the young captain, still crying, still broken. "You made a mistake," James said quietly. "Learn from it. Be better tomorrow." Then they continued walking. The elevator doors opened. They stepped inside. As the doors began to close, everyone in the lobby, every Marine, every officer, every guest came to attention and saluted. Held it until the doors shut completely. Then slowly, they lowered their hands. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The lobby stayed frozen, like time itself had stopped. Captain Kyle Evans stood alone in the center of it all, staring at his hands, wondering how the hell you recover from something like this. Wondering if you even should. The elevator doors closed, and for 3 seconds, nobody breathed. Then the lobby exploded into whispers. "Did you see his face?" 3 years in SOG. 3 years. That's impossible. The Vipers. I thought they were a myth. Morrison saluted him. The general saluted him first. Evans stood frozen in the center of it all, his dress blues suddenly feeling like they weighed 1,000 pounds. Webb touched his shoulder, but Evans flinched away. "Don't," Evans whispered. "Kyle, come on. Let's get you." "Don't touch me." Evans's voice cracked. "Don't. I can't. I can't right now." He walked toward the lobby doors, pushing through the crowd. People stepped aside. Nobody tried to stop him. They just watched him go, this young captain who'd been so confident 15 minutes ago, now stumbling like he'd been shot. He made it outside before his legs gave out. He sat down hard on the marble steps, put his face in his hands, and tried to remember how to breathe. Inside, Colonel Henderson was on his phone, his voice clipped and urgent. "Yes, sir. I understand. No, sir. The situation is contained. Captain Evans has been removed from the event." A pause. "Disciplinary action. That's above my pay grade, sir, but if you're asking my opinion..." Henderson's jaw tightened. He needs to be held accountable. What he did was inexcusable. Miller approached, his face still pale. "Colonel, the guests are starting to ask questions." What do you want me to tell them? Tell them the truth. An honored veteran was temporarily delayed at check-in due to an administrative error. The matter has been resolved and he's upstairs with the general now. Administrative error. Miller's voice was flat. That's what we're calling it. That's what we're calling it publicly. What we call it privately is something else entirely. Henderson pocketed his phone. Evans's career is over. He just doesn't know it yet. Maybe that's too harsh, sir. He made a mistake. A bad one, but a mistake is when you forget to file paperwork. A mistake is when you miss a formation. What Evans did wasn't a mistake. It was a character failure. Henderson's voice dropped low. He saw someone vulnerable and decided they were worthless. That's not something you train out of someone. That's who they are. Miller had no answer to that. Upstairs in a private dining room off the main ballroom, 4 old men sat around a table. They'd been talking quietly among themselves for the past 20 minutes, trading stories, comparing scars, doing the math on how many years it had been since they'd seen combat. 60 years, 58, 56, 54. They were all in their 80s now, all survivors of Makvisog, all men who'd run missions that officially never happened and came home to a country that didn't want to hear about it. Frank Castellano, 84, who'd lost his left leg below the knee in a firefight along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Robert Chen, 82, who'd been a tunnel rat and could still smell the copper tang of blood in enclosed spaces. Miguel Santos, 81, who'd been shot in the throat and spoke in a permanent raspy whisper. And David Washington, 83, who'd carried his wounded radio operator 17 miles through enemy territory and whose back had never been the same since. "You think they found anyone else?" Santos whispered. His voice sounded like gravel in a blender. "From the Vipers." "Morrison said he found one," Castellano replied. "Didn't say who." "Probably Kowalski," Chen said. "He was tough as nails. If anyone made it." The door opened. General Morrison stepped through first, his face grave, then Lily looking uncertain, and then moving slowly, leaning heavily on Morrison's arm, James O'Donnell shuffled into the room. The 4 old men rose from their chairs like they'd been yanked up by invisible strings. For 5 seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They just stared. Then Santos made a sound that wasn't quite human. A choked sob that came from somewhere deep in his chest. "Viper," he whispered. "Oh my God. Iron Viper." James's eyes found him, focused, and something happened to his face. The distance vanished, the confusion cleared. His eyes went sharp and present and alive. "Ghost," he breathed. Santos's call sign. "Ghost, is that really you?" Santos crossed the room in 3 limping steps and grabbed James in a bear hug that nearly knocked them both over. Lily moved to steady them, but Morrison touched her arm and shook his head. "Let them have this. I thought you were dead." Santos sobbed into James's shoulder. "The report said Laos, said the whole team went down. We had a memorial. We buried an empty casket. I got drunk and stayed drunk for a week because you were gone, and I'm here." James's voice was steady now, strong. His arms came up and wrapped around Santos. "I'm here, Ghost. I made it out." The other 3 closed in, forming a tight circle, hands reaching out, touching, confirming, making sure this was real. "Viper," Castellano breathed. "Holy hell, you look terrible." James laughed. Actually laughed. It sounded rusty, like machinery that hadn't been used in years. "You're one to talk, Hammer. When'd you get so old? When'd you get so skinny? What happened to you?" "Same thing that happened to all of us. I got old." Chen grabbed James's hand, squeezed it hard. His eyes were streaming. "They said you died in 71, spring of 71. The whole unit, overrun during exfil. That's what the report said." "The report was wrong." "What happened?" James's face went distant for a moment. The light in his eyes dimmed. "I'll tell you later. Right now, I just want to look at you. All of you. I can't believe you're alive." "5 of us," Washington said, his voice thick. "Out of how many men you think went through SOG?" 8,000, Morrison said quietly from where he stood by the door. give or take. Most tours lasted 6 months before death, injury, or psychological breakdown forced rotation. The 5 of you served a combined 14 years. That's statistically impossible. We were too stupid to die, Castellano said. Too mean, Chen added. Too scared of what would happen to our brothers if we weren't there, Santos whispered. His hand was still gripping James's shoulder, like he was afraid James would disappear if he let go. That's what kept me going. Knowing if I went down, someone else would have to take the mission. Someone else would die instead. James nodded slowly. Yeah, that was it. That was exactly it. They stood there, these 5 old men holding on to each other like drowning sailors gripping wreckage. Behind them, Morrison wiped his eyes. Lily was openly crying. Sir, Morrison said after a long moment, we should sit. Mr. O'Donnell needs to rest. I don't need to rest, James said, but his legs were shaking. I need to hear their stories. I need to know how they made it. And you will, but sit first, please. They moved to the table, slowly, reluctantly separating. James sank into a chair with a grateful sigh. His hand immediately found the table edge, gripping it like an anchor. The trembling had gotten worse. His left hand was shaking so badly he had to pin it against his thigh to make it stop. Lily brought him water. He tried to drink, but his hand wouldn't cooperate. She held the glass for him without being asked. He drank, swallowed, breathed. Sorry, he muttered. The shakes. They get worse when I'm tired, or emotional, or both. Parkinson's, Chen asked gently. Something like that. The doctors have fancy names for it. I just call it broken. We're all broken, Washington said. Question is whether we're broken in ways that matter. Amen to that. Castellano tapped his prosthetic leg against the table. It made a hollow sound. Lost this in '69. Punji Pit, if you can believe that. 50 years of medical advancement, and I still can't walk without limping. Santos touched his throat. Bullet through the voice box. Can't yell anymore. Can't sing. Can barely whisper. He smiled grimly. Makes it hard to call for help when you fall. Ask me how I know. How do you know? James asked softly. Because I fell last month and laid on my kitchen floor for 3 hours before my neighbor heard me banging on the pipes. The silence that followed was heavy. We got old, Chen said finally. How the hell did we get old? By surviving, James replied. By outlasting the war. By making it one more day, one more mission, one more year. And then, we looked up, and 50 years had gone by. Morrison cleared his throat. Gentlemen, if I may, tonight isn't about what you lost. It's about what you did. What you sacrificed. What you achieved. He moved to stand at the head of the table. For 50 years, your service has been classified, hidden, erased from the official record. You came home to a country that didn't want to hear about the war, and you were forced to carry your experiences in silence. No recognition, no thanks, no acknowledgement that you even existed. We knew what we signed up for, Castellano said. Maybe. But that doesn't make it right. Morrison's voice was firm. Tonight, we're correcting that. In about 30 minutes, you'll be brought into the main ballroom. In front of 500 Marines, active duty and retired, I'm going to tell them who you are, what you did, and we're going to honor you the way you should have been honored in 1971. Santos shook his head. General, with respect, we don't need... I know you don't need it, but we do. The Corps does. We need to look at men like you and remember what real courage looks like. What real sacrifice means. Morrison's eyes found James. Especially you, Viper. Do you know what your file says? James didn't answer. It says you ran 73 missions over 3 years. 73. The average SOG operator ran maybe 15 before rotation. You ran 73 and survived every single one. Your team had a 100% mission success rate. Not one failed objective. Not one compromised operation. You extracted 47 POWs, eliminated over 200 enemy combatants, and disrupted supply lines that probably saved thousands of American lives. We lost 15 men, James said quietly. My team, 15 brothers. That's not success. In any other unit, the casualty rate would have been worse. Your leadership, your tactics, your refusal to leave a man behind, that's why your survivors lasted as long as they did. Morrison paused. You know what else your file says? James looked up. It says you were recommended for the Medal of Honor. Twice. Both times the recommendation was classified and buried because acknowledging your missions would mean acknowledging we were operating in Laos and Cambodia. So instead of medals, you got silence. Instead of recognition, you got forgotten. James's jaw tightened. I didn't do it for medals. I know, but you earned them anyway. Lily spoke up for the first time since they'd entered the room. Her voice was small. Grandpa, is that true? You saved 47 people. James didn't look at her. It was a long time ago. Is it true? His hand found hers under the table, squeezed gently. Yes, honey. It's true. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because talking about it means remembering it. And remembering it means seeing their faces, the ones who didn't make it, the ones I couldn't save. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. I see them every night when I close my eyes. 47 saved is good, but 15 lost is what I remember. Santos reached across the table and grabbed James's other hand. We all carry them, brother. Every single one of us. The ghosts are what prove we're still human. Sometimes I wish I wasn't, James said. Sometimes I wish I'd gone down with them. At least then I wouldn't have to remember. Don't say that. Chen's voice was sharp. Don't ever say that. You survived for a reason. We all did. What reason? To get old and shake and forget where we put our keys? James pulled his hand free. I'm 86 years old. I can barely walk. I can't remember what I had for breakfast. But I can remember every scream, every explosion, every drop of blood. What kind of reason is that? Morrison stepped forward. The reason is that you're here, right now, with your brothers, with your granddaughter, with people who love you and need you and want to honor you. That's the reason. James was quiet for a long time, then almost too soft to hear, I'm tired, General. I'm so damn tired. I know, sir, but tonight, just for a few hours, let us carry some of that weight for you. Let us take some of that burden. You've been carrying it alone for 50 years. You don't have to anymore. A knock at the door interrupted them. An aide stepped in, nervous. General, they're ready for you in the ballroom. Morrison nodded. Give us 5 more minutes. The aide left. Morrison turned back to the table. Gentlemen, I know this is overwhelming. I know this is dredging up things you'd rather leave buried. But I need you to understand something. There are Marines downstairs, young Marines your grandson's age, who need to see you, who need to know that heroism isn't always loud, that sacrifice isn't always recognized, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is come home and keep living, even when every instinct tells you to give up. Washington spoke up, his voice rough. General, what happened downstairs before we came up? Morrison told us there was an incident. Morrison's face hardened. There was. A young captain didn't recognize Mr. O'Donnell's value. He made assumptions. He was disrespectful. The matter is being handled. Handled how? Castellano asked. That's not your concern. The hell it's not. Castellano's voice rose. Someone disrespected Viper. One of ours. Frank, don't. James's voice cut through. It's done. It's over. Let it go. Let it go. Someone treated you like garbage and you want me to let it go. Yes. James met his eyes. Because I remember being that age. I remember thinking I knew everything. I remember looking at the old World War II vets and thinking they were relics, dinosaurs. I remember not understanding what they'd been through because I hadn't been through it yet. He paused. That captain made a mistake. He'll learn from it. That's enough. Santos shook his head. You were always too forgiving, Viper. Even in country. Remember that ARVN officer who left us behind during the Tet offensive? You wanted to give him a second chance. We wanted to shoot him. And what would that have solved? Would have made us feel better. For about 5 minutes, then we'd just be killers who executed an ally. No thanks. James pushed himself to his feet slowly, using the table for support. Lily jumped up to help him, but he waved her off. I can stand on my own. He swayed but stayed upright, looked around at his brothers. You really want to do this? Go downstairs and let them stare at us like museum pieces. I want them to know we existed, Washington said quietly. I want them to know that before the fancy equipment and the drone strikes and the night vision goggles, there were men who went into the jungle with nothing but their wits and their brothers and somehow came back alive. I want them to know we mattered. We mattered to each other, Chen added. That should count for something. James looked at Morrison. And if I say no, if I say I want to go home and forget this whole night happened? Morrison's expression didn't change. Then I'll have my driver take you home, sir. No questions asked. No hard feelings. This is voluntary. Always has been. But you'd be disappointed. Personally, yes. But I'd understand. You've given enough. More than enough. Nobody has the right to ask you for more. James turned to Lily. What do you think, honey? She was crying again, but trying to hide it. I think I've spent my whole life with you and never really knew who you were. I think you're the strongest person I've ever met, and you've been hiding it under old man sweaters and quiet dinners. I think if you walk away now, you'll regret it tomorrow. She took his hand. But I also think if you stay, it's going to hurt. It's going to bring back things you've spent 50 years trying to forget. So whatever you decide, I'm with you. I'm right here. James squeezed her hand, looked at his brothers, looked at Morrison. Okay, he said finally. Okay, let's do this. But if I fall down those stairs, I'm blaming you, General. Morrison smiled. Fair enough, sir. They moved toward the door slowly, this group of broken old men. Castellano grabbed his cane. Chen adjusted his hearing aid. Santos cleared his throat, experimentally wincing. Washington straightened his tie with fingers that shook from old nerve damage. And James Iron Viper, longest-serving member of the most dangerous unit in the Vietnam War, took a deep breath and followed them out. The ballroom was massive. Crystal chandeliers, polished floors, round tables seating 10 each one filled with Marines in dress blues. The conversations were loud, energetic. 500 people talking, laughing, celebrating. They went silent when Morrison walked in with the 5 old men behind him. Not all at once, but like a wave. Table by table, heads turned. Conversations died. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. By the time they reached the stage at the far end, you could have heard a pin drop. Morrison helped James up the stairs. Lily stayed close, ready to catch him if he stumbled. The others followed. They arranged themselves in a line across the stage facing the crowd. 5 old men. Combined age 416 years. Combined combat experience 14 years. Combined nightmares too many to count. Morrison stepped to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, Marines, distinguished guests, tonight I'd like to introduce you to 5 men you've never heard of. 5 men whose service records are still largely classified. 5 men who fought in a war most of America wanted to forget, in units that officially didn't exist, on missions that were never acknowledged. He paused. These men are veterans of MAX v SOG, Studies and Observations Group, Special Operations in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some knew what that meant. Most didn't. Morrison continued. For those unfamiliar, SOG ran the most dangerous missions of the Vietnam War. Deep penetration reconnaissance, long-range patrols, prisoner extraction, operations behind enemy lines where rescue wasn't coming if things went wrong. The casualty rate was 75%. 3 out of 4 men who served in SOG were killed or captured. The ballroom was dead silent now. These 5 men are survivors, and one of them, Morrison's voice caught. He had to stop and clear his throat. One of them is the sole survivor of a unit called the Vipers, a team that ran missions so classified their existence was denied for 40 years. A team that had a 100% success rate over 3 years of operations. A team that lost 14 men and kept fighting anyway. Morrison turned to James. "Sir, would you please step forward?" James didn't move. His eyes had gone distant again. His hand was shaking violently. "Grandpa," Lily whispered. "He's talking to you." James blinked, focused, took one trembling step forward. Morrison's hand found his shoulder, steadying him. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is James O'Donnell, call sign Iron Viper. Tonight we honor him." The ballroom exploded into applause. Not polite applause, not obligatory, but thunderous, overwhelming applause that shook the chandeliers. 500 Marines on their feet, clapping, some whistling, some shouting. James stood there swaying slightly, looking out at the sea of faces with an expression that was equal parts terror and wonder. And then from somewhere in the back of the ballroom, someone started pounding their fist on their table in rhythm. Slow, steady, boom, boom, boom. Others picked it up. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was doing it. A percussion of respect, a drumbeat of honor. Boom, boom, boom. James's knees buckled. Morrison caught him. Lily rushed forward, but James pushed them both away and straightened up through sheer force of will. His right hand rose, shaking, trembling. He brought it to his forehead in a salute. The ballroom went silent. The pounding stopped. Then, as 500 Marines snapped to attention and returned it, 500 perfect salutes, held there, unwavering. James's hand dropped. He turned away from the crowd so they couldn't see his face. Couldn't see him crying. But they knew. They all knew. Downstairs in the lobby, Captain Kyle Evans sat on the marble steps with his head in his hands, listening to the thunder of applause from above and wondering what it felt like to deserve it. The applause died slowly, reluctantly, like nobody wanted to be the first to stop. James turned back to face the crowd, his eyes red but his spine straight. Morrison guided him back to stand with the others, and one by one the general called their names. Frank Castellano, call sign Hammer, 2 years with RT Python, 28 missions, Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars. Castellano stepped forward, leaning on his cane. The applause rose again. Robert Chen, call sign Shadow, 18 months with RT Anaconda, Tunnel Warfare Specialist, Purple Heart with 2 oak leaf clusters. Chen bowed slightly, his face stoic. Miguel Santos, call sign Ghost, 20 months with RT Cobra, Navy Cross for action in the Ashau Valley. Santos touched his throat in acknowledgement, unable to speak over the roar. David Washington, call sign Shepherd, 2 years with RT Rattler, saved his entire team during a compromised insertion. Distinguished Service Cross. Washington stood tall, despite his ruined back, and something in his eyes said he was seeing faces the crowd couldn't see. Morrison let the applause continue for a full minute before raising his hand for silence. When the room finally settled, his voice was thick with emotion. Tonight we break 50 years of silence. Tonight we tell the truth. These men fought in shadows so that others could stand in light. They bled in jungles so that we could sleep safely. They carried wounds, physical and otherwise, that never fully healed, and they did it without complaint, without recognition, without anyone knowing their names. He turned to face the 5 old men directly. On behalf of the United States Marine Corps, on behalf of every Marine who has served since, on behalf of a grateful nation that should have thanked you decades ago, thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for coming home and continuing to live even when living was the hardest mission of all. Morrison rendered a salute. The entire ballroom followed. 500 hands rose as one. James closed his eyes, and this time he didn't fight the tears. They came freely, silently, tracking down his weathered face. Beside him, Santos was shaking. Chen had his hand pressed over his mouth. Castellano was staring at the ceiling, jaw clenched. Washington stood perfectly still, but his shoulders heaved with suppressed sobs. When Morrison finally lowered his hand, he gestured to the tables. "Please, gentlemen, join us for dinner. Your seats are at the head table. Your families are welcome." Lily helped James down from the stage. His legs were barely holding him. Halfway down the stairs, he stumbled. She caught him, but his weight pulled them both off balance. 2 young Marines materialized from nowhere, catching them before they fell. "Easy, sir," one of them said. He was maybe 25, with lance corporal chevrons and scared eyes. We got you. James looked at him. Really looked. You been deployed, son? Yes, sir. Afghanistan. 2 tours. You make it home okay? The lance corporal hesitated. Physically, yes, sir. But not the other way. No, sir. Not yet. James gripped his arm. It takes time. Longer than you think it should. Longer than people tell you it will. But it gets easier. Not better. Just easier. How long did it take you, sir? James's smile was sad. I'll let you know when it happens. The lance corporal helped him to his seat at the head table and then stepped back, his eyes wet. His buddy pulled him away, whispering urgently. But the lance corporal kept looking back at James like he'd just seen something that rewrote his understanding of the world. Dinner was served, but James barely touched his food. He sat between Lily and Santos, his trembling hand wrapped around a glass of water he couldn't quite lift to his mouth. The conversation swirled around him, other veterans approaching the table to shake hands, to thank them, to tell their own stories. James nodded at each one, but his eyes were far away. You're not here, are you? Santos whispered beside him. You're back there. I'm always back there, James said quietly. Tonight just made it louder. Is it Laos? The last mission? James didn't answer for a long moment. Then, yeah. Spring of 71. We were extracting a POW from a compound near the border. Intel said light resistance. Intel was wrong. Santos waited. The table around them was loud enough that nobody else could hear. We got the POW out. James continued, his voice barely audible. Got him to the LZ. The choppers were inbound, we could hear them. 30 seconds away, maybe less. He stopped, swallowed hard. Then the tree line lit up. RPGs, machine gun fire, everything. The first chopper took a hit and went down. The second pulled off, and we were alone. How many? 15 of us. Maybe 200 of them. The math wasn't good. How'd you make it out? James's hand tightened around the water glass. I didn't. Not really. I mean, my body walked out of that jungle 3 days later, but everything else stayed behind. Santos put his hand on James's shoulder. Who'd you lose? Everyone. Tommy Reeves took a round through the chest in the first 30 seconds. Kenny Williams lasted maybe a minute after that. Then Martinez. Then Kowalski. Then Patterson. He was reciting names like a litany. They kept falling, and I kept fighting, and by the time the extraction team found me, I was the only one still breathing. Jesus, Viper. I carried them as far as I could, made it maybe 200 yards before I had to leave them, had to leave their bodies behind. James's voice cracked. I can still see their faces, every single one. I can tell you what they were wearing, what their last words were, the exact way they fell. I've been trying to forget for 50 years, and I can't. I can't. The ballroom suddenly felt too loud, too bright, too full of people who didn't understand and never would. James pushed back from the table, nearly knocking over his chair. I need air, he gasped. Lily was on her feet instantly. Grandpa, let me help. I'm fine. I just need a minute. But he wasn't fine. His breathing was coming in short, sharp gasps. His left hand was shaking so violently, it looked like he was having a seizure. His eyes had gone wide and panicked, searching for exits, for threats, for something that only existed in his memory. Morrison saw it happening and moved quickly, intercepting James before he could stumble into a waiter carrying a tray of glasses. Sir, let's get you somewhere quiet. I can't be here. I can't. There's too many people, too much noise. I know. Come with me. Morrison guided him toward a side door Lily closed behind. They emerged into a service hallway, dim and cool and blessedly empty. James leaned against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor, his head between his knees. Breathe, sir, Morrison said quietly. Just breathe. You're safe. You're home. The war is over. The war is never over, James gasped. It's always happening. Right now, right behind my eyes. I can hear the gunfire. I can smell the blood. I can feel Tommy dying in my arms, and I can't save him. I can't save any of them. Lily knelt beside him, tears streaming down her face. Grandpa, please. Please come back. You're scaring me. I'm sorry, honey. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have come tonight. I shouldn't have let them drag it all back up. I was doing okay. I was managing. And now it's all falling apart again. Morrison crouched down to James's level. Sir, listen to me. What you're feeling right now, that's not weakness. That's not failure. That's the cost of surviving. That's what it means to carry what you've carried for as long as you've carried it. I'm supposed to be strong. I'm supposed to be Iron Viper. You're supposed to be human, Morrison interrupted. And humans break. They break, and they heal, and they break again. That's normal. That's okay. It doesn't feel okay. I know. But it is. They sat there in the hallway for 10 minutes. Slowly, James's breathing steadied. The shaking in his hand decreased from violent to merely constant. His eyes lost some of their wild panic and settled back into distant confusion. I'm sorry, he said finally. I ruined your event. You didn't ruin anything, sir. You honored us with your presence. That's more than enough. I should go home. If that's what you need, we'll take you right now. No questions asked. James looked at Lily. Her face was streaked with mascara and tears. I'm sorry, honey. I know you wanted to stay. I don't care about staying, she said fiercely. I care about you. We can leave right now if you want. He studied her face for a long moment. Then he looked back toward the ballroom door, where the muffled sounds of conversation and music filtered through. The others, he said. Santos and Chen and the rest. They need this night. They need to be seen. If I leave, it takes away from that. They'll understand, Morrison said. I know they will. But I won't. James took a deep breath and started the slow process of getting to his feet. Morrison and Lily helped him up. I'm going back in, but I'm sitting down and I'm not talking to anyone else. Can you make that happen? Morrison nodded. Consider it done. They returned to the ballroom through a back entrance. Morrison had a word with the staff, and suddenly there was a screen of junior officers forming a polite but firm barrier around the head table. Well-wishers could wave from a distance, but nobody was getting close enough to corner the old men into conversation. James sank into his chair with a grunt. Santos leaned over immediately. You okay, brother? No, but I'm here. That's all that matters. The dinner continued. Speeches were made, awards were presented. A video played showing declassified footage from SOG operations, grainy, jumpy helicopter shots of jungles and rivers and men moving through impossible terrain. Every time the screen showed a firefight or an extraction, James's hand tightened on the table edge until his knuckles went white. Then came the moment nobody had warned him about. A young major stepped to the microphone holding a wooden case. Sir, if you would please join me on stage. James looked at Morrison. What's this? Something long overdue. Lily helped him stand and walk to the stage. Each step felt like climbing a mountain. When he finally made it to the microphone, he was breathing hard. The major opened the case. Inside, nestled on blue velvet, was a medal. Silver star, blue ribbon. James O'Donnell for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against an enemy of the United States while serving with MACV-SOG in the Republic of Vietnam. On April 23, 1971, Sergeant O'Donnell's team came under heavy fire during a prisoner extraction operation. Despite being outnumbered 15-1 and cut off from air support, Sergeant O'Donnell organized a defensive perimeter and held the position for 6 hours until reinforcements arrived. His actions resulted in the successful extraction of a high-value prisoner and saved the lives of 3 fellow team members. For his extraordinary heroism, he was recommended for the Navy Cross. The major paused. However, due to the classified nature of the operation, this recommendation was sealed and never processed. Tonight, 54 years later, we are correcting that injustice. James O'Donnell, it is my honor to present you with the Navy Cross. The ballroom erupted. But James was shaking his head. That's not right, he said into the microphone. His voice echoed through the room. That's not how it happened. The major looked confused. Morrison stepped forward. Sir, I didn't save 3 men. I lost 12. 12 brothers died that day because I made the wrong call. Because I trusted bad intel. Because I was too stubborn to abort the mission when we should have. Sir, with respect, the after-action reports. The after-action reports were written by people who weren't there, who didn't see what I saw, who didn't have to leave their friends bleeding in the mud because they couldn't carry them and fight at the same time. James's voice was rising, getting stronger. You want to give me a medal? Give it to them. Give it to Reeves and Williams and Martinez and all the others who died following my orders. The ballroom was absolutely silent. Sir, Morrison said gently, they can't receive medals. They're gone. But you're here, and you deserve recognition for what you endured. I don't deserve anything except to remember their names, to make sure someone knows they existed, that they mattered. James turned to face the crowd directly. Tommy Reeves from Atlanta, 22 years old. He wanted to be a teacher. Kenny Williams from Detroit, 20 years old. He had a daughter he never got to meet. Carlos Martinez from El Paso, 23 years old. He could play guitar better than anyone I've ever heard. He kept going, reciting names, ages, hometowns, dreams. The entire team, all 12 men who died that day. When he finished, his voice was hoarse. Those are the heroes, not me. I'm just the one who survived to remember them. Morrison approached slowly. Sir, you're right. They were heroes. They all were. But so are you. Not despite surviving, but because of it. Because you carried their memory. Because you never forgot. Because you came home and kept living, even though living meant remembering. James looked at the medal in the case, at the blue ribbon and silver star that represented a day he'd spent 50 years trying to forget. If I take this, he said quietly, I'm accepting that what happened that day was okay, that losing 12 men was an acceptable price for extracting one prisoner, and I can't do that. I can't. You're not accepting anything except that you fought with honor in an impossible situation, Morrison replied. You did everything a leader could do. You made the hard calls. You kept fighting when any sane person would have surrendered. And you lived with the consequences. That's worth honoring. James was silent for a long moment. Then, his hand trembling, he reached out and touched the medal. Okay, he whispered. Okay, but not for me. For them. So their names are attached to something. So someone, somewhere, knows they existed. Morrison pinned the medal to James's chest with careful reverence. When he stepped back and saluted, the entire ballroom rose as one. But James wasn't looking at them. He was looking down at the medal, his lips moving silently, reciting the names again. Like a prayer, like a promise. Lily helped him back to his seat. He sat down heavily, one hand pressed against the medal like he was trying to feel the weight of it. Or maybe the weight of the 12 ghosts it represented. Santos leaned over. You did good up there, brother. I just told the truth. That's all any of us can do. The dinner wound down. People started leaving in groups, stopping by the head table to shake hands to thank the old men one more time. James accepted each handshake mechanically, his mind somewhere else. A young lieutenant approached, nervous. Sir, I just wanted to say thank you. My grandfather served in Vietnam. He never talked about it, never told us anything. He died 5 years ago, and I still don't know what he went through. His voice cracked. But seeing you tonight, hearing you talk about your brothers, it helps me understand a little bit. What he might have carried, why he was the way he was. James looked up at him. What was his name, son? Robert Kovach. He was with the 101st Airborne. Did he make it home in one piece? Physically, yeah. But he drank, a lot, and he had nightmares. I remember hearing him scream at night when I stayed at his house. James nodded slowly. He was fighting the same war I'm fighting. The one that doesn't end just because you leave the battlefield. Tell me something, Lieutenant. If you could go back and talk to him one more time, what would you say? The young man's eyes filled with tears. I'd tell him I'm sorry, that I'm sorry I didn't understand, that I'm sorry I thought he was just a mean old drunk, that I'm sorry I didn't try harder to help him. He knew, James said softly. Trust me. He knew you cared even if you didn't know how to show it. And he was probably grateful you didn't understand, because understanding means you went through it too, and no grandfather wants that for their grandson. The lieutenant wiped his eyes. Thank you, sir. That means more than you know. After he left, Lily touched James's arm. That was kind. What you said to him. It was true. When you've been through hell, the last thing you want is for the people you love to join you there. He looked at her. That's why I never told you about any of this. I wanted you to grow up normal, happy, without the weight of knowing what your grandfather did, what he saw. I understand that, but Grandpa not telling me didn't protect me. It just made me feel like I didn't really know you, like there was this huge part of your life that was locked away and I wasn't allowed in. I wasn't trying to lock you out. I was trying to keep the darkness contained, but it leaked out anyway, in the nightmares, in the way you'd flinch at loud noises, in the way you'd go somewhere else in your head and I couldn't reach you. She squeezed his hand. I'm glad I know now. Not because the stories are good, they're horrible, but because now I understand. Now when you go away in your head, I know where you've gone, and I can try to bring you back. James's eyes filled with tears again. When did you get so wise? I learned from the best. They sat together in comfortable silence while the ballroom slowly emptied. The other SOG veterans were saying their goodbyes, making promises to stay in touch, to meet again. Numbers were exchanged, addresses written down, plans made that may or may not actually happen. Morrison approached the table one last time. Gentlemen, if there's anything you need, anything at all, you have my direct number. Don't hesitate to use it. Actually, General, Washington spoke up. There is something. Name it. The memorial at Quantico, the one for special operations. Is there any way to get our brothers' names added, the ones who didn't make it? Morrison's face went serious. How many names are we talking about? The 5 old men looked at each other. Santos spoke first. 11 from my team. Chen. 8 from mine. Castellano. 13. Washington. 9. James. 12. Morrison did the math. 53 names. All classified deaths. Most of them aren't even listed as killed in action, James said. They're listed as missing, or just gone. No bodies recovered, no official records. Their families got flag-draped caskets with nothing inside. I'll make it happen, Morrison said. I'll petition to have them added. It might take time, there's bureaucracy classification issues, but I'll make it happen. Thank you, sir, James said quietly. That matters. More than the medals. More than tonight. Just having their names somewhere official, somewhere their families can visit. Morrison nodded. You have my word. He shook each man's hand and then stepped back. It's been an honor, gentlemen, a true honor. After he left, the 5 old men sat together at the empty table alone, except for Lily and the few staff members cleaning up. So what do we do now? Chen asked. We go home, Castellano said. We take our pills. We ice our joints. We try to sleep and probably fail. I meant long term. Are we going to stay in touch? Meet up again? I'd like that, Santos whispered. It's been good seeing you all, remembering we weren't alone in this. Next Memorial Day, Washington suggested. We meet at the wall in D.C., pay our respects to the names. Honor the fallen. They all nodded. It was a plan. Maybe it would happen. Maybe it wouldn't. But it was something to look forward to. Something to survive for. One by one they stood, hugged, made promises to call, and then they went their separate ways, these 5 old warriors disappearing into the night. James and Lily were the last to leave. At the door, James paused and looked back at the empty ballroom, at the stage where he'd stood, at the table where he'd sat with his brothers. You okay, Grandpa? Yeah, he said softly. Yeah, I think I am. For the first time in a long time, I think I might actually be okay. They walked through the lobby together. It was nearly empty now, just a few stragglers and hotel staff. Near the entrance, sitting alone on a bench with his head in his hands, was Captain Kyle Evans. He looked up as they approached. His eyes were red, his face blotchy. He'd been crying for hours. He stood quickly. Sir, James held up his hand. Not now, son. I'm too tired. Please. I need to say this. I need you to know that I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry. I was arrogant and cruel, and I treated you like garbage when you deserved respect. And I don't know how to make it right, but I need to try, because I can't live with what I did. I can't sleep. I can't eat. I can't stop seeing your face when I grabbed your granddaughter. And He broke down completely, shoulders heaving with sobs. James stood there for a moment watching this young man fall apart. Then he stepped forward and put his hand on Evans's shoulder. "Captain," he said gently, "look at me." Evans raised his head. "You made a mistake, a big one. You hurt people. You showed poor judgment and worse character. But you know what? You're young. You can learn from this. You can be better. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Maybe not, but you're getting it anyway." James squeezed his shoulder. "Use it wisely. Become the kind of officer who would never make this mistake again. Become the kind of man who sees people's value regardless of how they look or how old they are or whether they fit your expectations." Evans nodded, unable to speak. "And Captain, one more thing." "Yes, sir." "The next time you see an old veteran, regardless of what they're wearing, or whether they have documentation, you treat them with respect. Not because of what they might have done, but because they're human beings who deserve dignity. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir. I swear I can." James nodded. "Good. Now go home. Get some sleep. Tomorrow, you start becoming better." He walked away, leaving Evans standing there in the empty lobby crying, but also maybe beginning to heal. Outside, Lily helped James into a taxi. As they pulled away from the hotel, she looked at him. "You didn't have to forgive him, you know. He didn't deserve it." "Maybe not," James said. "But holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I've carried enough weight for 50 years. I'm not adding him to it." She rested her head on his shoulder. "I love you, Grandpa." "I love you too, honey, more than you know." The taxi drove through the quiet streets carrying an old warrior home. In his pocket, the Navy Cross pressed against his chest. In his heart, 12 ghosts rested a little easier. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new pain, new struggles with memory and age, and the slow decline of a body that had been pushed beyond its limits decades ago. But tonight, James O'Donnell, callsign Iron Viper, sole survivor of the Viper's Keeper of Names carrier of ghosts, had been seen, had been honored, had been remembered. And for one night at least, that was enough. The taxi pulled up to a small house in a quiet neighborhood 40 minutes outside the city. Single story, faded blue paint, a porch light that flickered like it was thinking about giving up. James paid the driver with shaking hands while Lily helped him out of the back seat. "You need help getting inside, Grandpa. I've been walking into this house for 30 years. I think I can manage one more time." But his legs disagreed. Halfway up the front walk, they went out from under him. Lily caught him before he hit the ground, but barely. "Okay," he gasped. "Maybe I need a little help." She got him inside and onto the couch. His whole body was trembling now, not just his hand. The adrenaline that had kept him upright through the evening was draining away, leaving nothing but exhaustion and pain. "I'm going to make you some tea," Lily said. "I don't want tea. You're getting tea anyway." She disappeared into the kitchen. James sat alone in the living room, the Navy Cross still pinned to his chest. He touched it with one finger, tracing the outline of the star. "Tommy," he whispered to the empty room. "Kenny, Carlos, did I do right by you tonight? Did I honor you the way you deserved?" The house didn't answer. It never did. Lily returned with tea he wouldn't drink and sat beside him. "You should take your medication. Later." "Grandpa?" I said later. His voice was sharp, then immediately softened. "I'm sorry, honey. I'm just tired. So damn tired." "Then go to bed." "Can't. Not yet. If I close my eyes right now, I'll see their faces. I need to stay awake a little longer. Let the memories settle." She took his hand. They sat in silence while the clock on the wall ticked away the minutes. Outside, a car drove past. A dog barked. Normal sounds. Peaceful sounds. The kind of sounds that had nothing to do with jungles or gunfire or men dying in mud. "Can I ask you something?" Lily said finally. "You can ask, I might not answer. Why didn't you ever talk about this? Any of this Mom doesn't know. I didn't know. Did Grandma know before she died?" James was quiet for a long time. "Your grandmother knew some. Not everything. She knew I had nightmares. She knew I'd wake up screaming sometimes. She knew there were places I couldn't go and sounds I couldn't handle. But the details, no. I never told her the details. Why not? Because the day I came home from Vietnam, I made myself a promise. I promised that I would leave the war over there, that I wouldn't bring it into our house, into our marriage, into our family. I would carry it, but I would carry it alone." He paused. "I thought I was protecting her, protecting you and your mother. Turns out I was just isolating myself. You could have shared it. Let us help carry it." How do you share something like that with people you love? How do you look your wife in the eye and tell her you killed men with your bare hands? How do you hug your daughter goodnight and not think about the children you saw dead in villages? How do you... His voice broke. "How do you let the people you love see the monster you became? You're not a monster. You didn't see what I did, what I had to do to survive. I don't need to see it. I know you. I know you're good. I know you're kind. I know you forgave that captain tonight when anyone else would have destroyed him. That doesn't erase what I did over there. Maybe not, but it proves that whatever you did, you're still human, still capable of mercy, still my grandfather." She squeezed his hand. "The war might have changed you, but it didn't break you. You're still here. You're still fighting. That counts for something." James looked at her, this young woman who'd somehow become wise beyond her years. "When did you grow up?" "Probably around the time I realized my grandfather was a hero and didn't even know it. I'm not a hero. I'm just a survivor. Same thing sometimes." He was too tired to argue. He let his head fall back against the couch and closed his eyes despite his earlier promise to himself. The faces came immediately. Tommy, Kenny, Carlos, all 12 of them young and alive in his memory, frozen at the age they'd been when they died. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry I couldn't save you." "Grandpa." Lily's voice seemed to come from far away. "Who are you talking to?" "Ghosts," he said. "Always ghosts." He must have fallen asleep because the next thing he knew, morning light was streaming through the windows and his neck hurt from the angle he'd been sleeping at. Lily was gone. A blanket had been tucked around him. On the coffee table sat his medication and a glass of water. He took the pills with shaking hands and tried to stand. His body protested every movement. His back screamed. His knees felt like broken glass. At 86, every morning was a negotiation with pain. He made it to the bathroom, made it through his morning routine, and was shuffling toward the kitchen when the doorbell rang. He wasn't expecting anyone. Lily had her own key. For a moment, paranoia flared, old instincts that whispered about threats and ambushes and never trusting an unexpected knock. He opened the door. Captain Kyle Evans stood on his porch in civilian clothes, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. "Sir," Evans said quickly, like he was afraid James would slam the door in his face. "I know you told me to go home. I know you probably don't want to see me, but I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about what I did, and I need to make this right. I need to do something." James stared at him. "Son, it's 7 in the morning. How did you even find my address?" Evans had the decency to look ashamed. "I asked General Morrison's aide. I told him I needed to apologize properly, and he gave me your address. If that was wrong, if I violated your privacy, I'm sorry. I can leave right now." "You drove all the way out here to apologize again." "No, sir. I drove all the way out here to ask if there's anything I can do. Anything at all. Yard work, repairs, errands. I don't care. I just need to do something to make up for what I did." James studied him for a long moment. The young captain looked genuinely broken. His eyes were red-rimmed. His hands shook slightly. He'd probably been up all night wrestling with guilt and shame. "You really want to help?" James asked. "Yes, sir. Please." "Okay, come inside." Evans followed him into the house, looking around nervously like he was entering sacred ground. James pointed to the couch. "Sit." Evans sat. James lowered himself into his armchair with a grunt. "You want to make things right? Here's how. Tell me your story." "My story?" "Yeah, where you're from. How you ended up in the Marines. What made you think you had the right to treat people the way you treated me last night?" Evans's face flushed. "Sir, I don't think that's... I'm 86 years old and my back hurts and I haven't had my coffee yet. You asked how you could help. This is how. Talk to me. Let me understand who you are so I can figure out why you did what you did." Evans took a shaky breath. Okay. I'm from Ohio. Small town. My father was a Marine. His father was a Marine. I grew up knowing I'd join. It wasn't even a question. And your deployments, you said 3? Yes, sir. Iraq twice. Afghanistan once. I saw combat in all 3. Lost friends in all 3. That why you're so angry? Evans's head snapped up. I'm not angry. Yes, you are. I saw it last night. The way you looked at me, the contempt, the dismissiveness, that wasn't just arrogance. That was anger looking for a target. I wasn't angry at you specifically, but you were angry at something, or someone. What was it? Evans was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. My father. I was angry at my father. Why? Because he was a Marine, a decorated Marine, 3 tours in Vietnam, Silver Star, Purple Heart. He was a hero. Evans' hands clenched into fists. And he came home and drank himself to death by the time I was 16. He was violent, mean. He'd rage at nothing. Hit my mother, hit me. And everyone just accepted it because he was a war hero and war heroes get a pass. James felt something cold settle in his chest. Go on. I joined the Marines to honor him, to prove I could be what he was. But the whole time I was also trying to prove I could be better, that I wouldn't let the war break me, that I wouldn't come home and fall apart. Evans' voice cracked. And then last night I saw you. This old man in a worn jacket, shaking, confused, and all I could think was, that's what my father became. That's the future waiting for me if I'm not careful. And I was so scared of becoming that I tried to destroy it. The pieces clicked into place. James understood now. You weren't mocking me. You were trying to kill your father's ghost. I guess so. Yeah. Evans wiped his eyes. That doesn't excuse what I did. Nothing excuses it. But that's the truth. I saw you and I saw him and I panicked. James leaned forward in his chair. Let me tell you something, son. Your father wasn't a bad man. He was a broken man. There's a difference. He hurt people. I know. And that's not okay. But he was fighting a war inside his head that never ended. The drinking, the violence, the rage, those were symptoms of wounds nobody could see. Wounds that wouldn't heal because back then we didn't talk about them. We didn't have words like PTSD or trauma therapy. We just had silence and shame and the expectation that real men tough it out. That's not an excuse. I'm not making excuses. I'm giving you context. Your father did terrible things. He hurt you and your mother, and that's on him. But he was also sick, damaged, and nobody helped him because nobody knew how. Evans shook his head. You went through the same thing. You saw the same horrors, maybe worse. But you didn't become violent. You didn't hurt your family. Didn't I? James's voice was quiet. I wasn't physically violent, no, but I was absent, distant. I missed birthdays and anniversaries because I couldn't handle crowds. I'd disappear into my head for days at a time. I'd wake up screaming and scare my daughter. I put my wife through hell because I wouldn't talk about what was wrong. So don't tell me I didn't hurt people. I just hurt them in different ways. But you never hit them. No, I never hit them. But that doesn't make me better than your father. It just means my damage expressed itself differently. They sat in silence. Outside, a neighbor started a lawnmower. The sound made James flinch, but he forced himself to stay in his chair. You want to know the real difference between me and your father? James asked finally. What? I got lucky. I came home to a wife who was patient, who gave me space when I needed it but never let me isolate completely. I had a job that kept me busy but didn't demand too much interaction. And I lived long enough to see attitudes change, to see people start acknowledging that war wounds aren't always visible. He paused. Your father wasn't lucky. He came home to a country that spit on veterans, to a VA that was overwhelmed and underfunded, to a culture that told him to man up and get over it. So he self-medicated with alcohol and lashed out at the people closest to him because he didn't know what else to do. Evans was crying now, silently but steadily. I wanted to hate him. It was easier to hate him. I know, but hate is just fear wearing a mask. You weren't afraid of me last night. You were afraid of becoming your father, of ending up broken and violent and alone. Are you saying I shouldn't be afraid of that? No. I'm saying fear is useful, but only if you let it teach you instead of control you. James stood slowly, his joints popping. He crossed to where Evans sat and put a hand on his shoulder. You want to honor your father? Don't become him. Learn from his mistakes. Get help when you need it. Talk about what you're feeling instead of burying it. Be better. How do I do that? Start by forgiving him. Not for his sake, for yours. Because carrying that anger is like carrying a live grenade. Eventually it's going to go off and hurt someone. Evans looked up at him. Can I ask you something, sir? Go ahead. Do you ever forgive yourself for the men you couldn't save? The question hit James like a physical blow. He stepped back and sank into his chair. No, he said finally. I don't. Every day for 50 years I've woken up and remembered their faces. Every day I've asked myself if I could have done something different, made a different call, saved one more life. But you know that's not rational. You know you did everything you could. Knowing and feeling are two different things, son. Up here, James tapped his head. I know I did my best, but in here, he pressed his fist against his chest. I'll never believe it. I'll carry that guilt until the day I die. That's not fair. War isn't fair. Survival isn't fair. The fact that I'm sitting here at 86 while Tommy Reeves died at 22 isn't fair. But it's reality. And you learn to live with it, or you don't. Evans wiped his eyes. How do you keep going? Knowing you'll never forgive yourself. Because the alternative is giving up. And if I give up, then their deaths meant nothing. If I keep going, if I keep living, if I keep telling their stories, then at least they're remembered. At least they mattered. Is that enough? Just remembering? It has to be, because it's all I've got. The doorbell rang again. James frowned. I'm more popular this morning than I've been in years. He opened the door to find Lily standing there with grocery bags. Grandpa, I brought... She stopped when she saw Evans. What are you doing here? He came to apologize, James said. Again. And you let him in. I did. Lily looked between them, confusion and anger warring on her face. Grandpa, after what he did, is over and done with. Captain Evans and I have been having a conversation, a good one. You want to join us? She set the groceries down with more force than necessary. Fine, but if he says one wrong thing, he won't, James said. Will you, Captain? No, sir. They moved to the kitchen. Lily unpacked groceries while James made coffee, and Evans sat awkwardly at the table, clearly uncertain what he was doing there. So what happens now? Lily asked, slamming a can of soup into the cupboard. He apologizes, you forgive him, and we all pretend last night didn't happen. No, James said. We acknowledge it happened. We learn from it, and we move forward. That easy? I didn't say it was easy. I said it's what we're going to do. She turned to face Evans. You have no idea what you put him through last night. He had a panic attack in the hallway. He almost collapsed on stage. He came home and sat on the couch talking to dead people until he passed out. That's what your arrogance cost him. Evans looked stricken. Sir, I didn't know. How could you? James interrupted. You saw an old man. You had no context for what that old man had been through. That's not entirely your fault. Yes, it is, Lily snapped. He made assumptions. He treated you like garbage. He grabbed me. That's not a misunderstanding, that's character. You're right, Evans said quietly. It is character. Bad character. Character I'm trying to fix. Trying isn't enough. Then what is? Tell me what I need to do, and I'll do it. Lily opened her mouth, but James held up his hand. Enough. Both of you. He poured 3 cups of coffee and set them on the table. Captain Lily is right. You showed poor character last night. You made assumptions based on appearances. You treated an invited guest like an intruder. And you escalated a situation that should have been resolved with a phone call. Yes, sir. But Lily, the captain, is also right. He's trying to be better. He came here at 7 in the morning to apologize face to face. He's sitting in my kitchen drinking my coffee and letting us rake him over the coals because he knows he deserves it. That takes courage. Or desperation, Lily muttered. Sometimes they're the same thing. James took a sip of coffee. It was too hot and burned his tongue, but he didn't care. Here's what's going to happen. Captain Evans is going to leave here in a few minutes. He's going to go back to his life and his career, and he's going to remember this night for the rest of his life. Every time he sees an elderly person, every time he makes an assumption about someone based on how they look, he's going to remember. And he's going to do better. Evans nodded. I will, sir. I promise. Good. And Lily, you're going to accept that people make mistakes. Bad mistakes. Terrible mistakes. And sometimes the best thing you can do is give them the chance to fix those mistakes. She crossed her arms. Fine. But I don't have to like it. Nobody said you had to. They drank their coffee in tense silence. After a few minutes, Evans stood. I should go. I've taken enough of your time. He looked at James. Thank you, sir. For talking to me. For not throwing me out. For giving me more mercy than I deserved. You're welcome, son. And I meant what I said. If there's anything you need, repairs, errands, anything, you call me. He pulled out a card and set it on the table. My personal cell. Anytime. Day or night. After he left, Lily turned to James. You're too forgiving. Maybe. Or maybe I just understand that broken people do broken things. And punishing them forever doesn't fix anything. He hurt you. He did. And I'm choosing to let it go. Not for his sake. For mine. Because I'm too old and too tired to carry more anger than I already do. She hugged him suddenly fiercely. I don't want you to hurt anymore. I know, honey, but hurt is part of living. The question is what you do with it. They spent the rest of the morning together. She made him breakfast he barely touched. They watched game shows he didn't really follow. Normal things, quiet things. The kind of things that used to bore him but now felt precious. Around noon, his phone rang. He didn't recognize the number. Hello. Viper. The voice was hoarse familiar. Santos. Ghost. How are you feeling today? Like I got hit by a truck. You. Same. Worth it, though. Yeah, it was. Santos paused. Listen, I'm calling because I wanted to check on you. Last night got intense. I saw you leave the stage. I just wanted to make sure you're okay. I'm okay. Tired. Sore. But okay. Good. That's good. Another pause. Viper, can I tell you something? Of course. Last night was the first time in 50 years I didn't feel alone. Seeing you, seeing the others, remembering that we survived together, it helped. It helped more than I can say. James felt his throat tighten. I know what you mean. I think we should do this more. Not the big ceremony. Just get together. Talk. Remember the good parts. Help each other with the bad parts. I'd like that. Memorial Day. At the wall. We all agreed. You're coming, right? I'll be there. Promise me. Because if you're not there, I'm not sure I'll have the courage to go. I promise, Ghost. I'll be there. After they hung up, James sat holding the phone. Lily was watching him. Who was that? One of my brothers. From the war. We're meeting in May. That's good, Grandpa. That's really good. Yeah, he said softly. It is. The rest of the day passed quietly. Lily left in the afternoon. James took his medication, ate dinner, watched the news. Normal things. But underneath the normalcy, something had shifted. Something had changed. For 50 years, he'd been alone with his memories, alone with his guilt, alone with the weight of 12 ghosts and a war that never ended. But now he had Santos's phone number. Now he had a plan to meet the others in May. Now he had proof that he wasn't the only one still fighting. That night when he closed his eyes and the faces came as they always did, he whispered to them like always, "I'm still here. I'm still remembering. I'm still honoring you." But this time, instead of just grief and guilt, there was something else. Hope. Fragile. Uncertain. But there. And for James O'Donnell, 86 years old, sole survivor of the Viper's keeper of names and carrier of ghosts, that tiny spark of hope was enough to keep fighting for one more day. Because maybe, just maybe, he wasn't carrying this weight alone anymore. Maybe there were others who understood. Maybe the war didn't have to be fought in silence. Maybe after 50 years, he could finally start to heal. Not completely. Not ever completely. But enough. Enough to keep living. Enough to keep remembering. Enough to face tomorrow. 3 weeks passed like water through a sieve. James settled back into his routine morning pills, afternoon naps, evening news, the slow clockwork of an old man's life. But something was different now. The phone rang more. Santos called twice a week just to talk. Chen sent a letter, actual paper and ink, asking if James remembered a particular mission in '69. Washington texted badly with all caps and no punctuation, but he texted. They were reaching out, finding each other again, building something they should have built 50 years ago. Lily visited every other day, watching him closer now, looking for signs he was slipping, looking for evidence the night at the ball had broken something that couldn't be fixed. "I'm fine," he told her for the 100th time. "You keep saying that." "Because it keeps being true." "Grandpa, you had 3 nightmares this week. I heard you from the guest room." He couldn't argue with that. The nightmares had gotten worse since the ball. More vivid. More frequent. Like honoring the dead had given them permission to visit more often. "They come and go," he said. "Always have." "Maybe you should talk to someone. A therapist. Someone who specializes in, I'm not talking to a stranger about things I won't even talk to you about." "Then talk to me." "No." "Why not?" "Because once I start, I won't be able to stop. And you don't need those images in your head. Trust me." She dropped it, but he could see the worry in her eyes. Could see her calculating how much time he had left and whether she'd ever really know who he was before he was gone. On a Tuesday morning in late November, the mail brought something unexpected. A thick envelope with a Department of Defense return address. James stared at it for 5 minutes before opening it. Inside was a letter from General Morrison and a list of names. 53 names. The brothers who'd died in SOG operations. The memorial edition had been approved. In 6 months, their names would be carved into stone at Quantico. James's hands shook so badly he dropped the letter twice trying to read it. "They're doing it," he whispered to the empty room. "They're actually doing it." He called Santos immediately. "Did you get the letter?" "Just opened it," Santos rasped. "I can't believe it. Tommy's name. Carlos's name. All of them. On a wall. Official. Their families can visit. If they have families left. If they haven't all died waiting for acknowledgement that never came." James hadn't thought of that. How many mothers and fathers had died not knowing where their sons were buried? How many wives had remarried, trying to move on from husbands listed as missing? How many children had grown up with no father and no grave to visit? "We need to find them," James said suddenly. "The families. We need to tell them their boys are being honored, that they weren't forgotten." Viper, some of those families might not want to be found, might not want to reopen old wounds. Then we ask. We reach out. We give them the choice. But we can't just let this happen without telling them. Santos was quiet for a moment. "You're right. Okay, right. I'll call Chen in Washington. We'll start making a list. See who we can track down." They spent the next 2 weeks on the phone, digging through old memories and limited records. James remembered most of his team members' hometowns. Santos had kept a journal with addresses that were 50 years out of date, but at least gave them starting points. Washington still had his old address book, water-stained and falling apart, but legible. They found 7 families, 7 out of 53. The others were lost to time, moved away, or died, or simply disappeared into the gaps where records didn't reach. James took on 3 names himself: Tommy Reeves from Atlanta, Kenny Williams from Detroit, Carlos Martinez from El Paso. Tommy's mother was still alive, 92 years old, in a nursing home. James called and explained who he was. Tommy. Her voice was thin as paper. You knew my Tommy. Yes, ma'am. I served with him. He was on my team. They never told me what happened. Just that he was missing. Presumed dead. For 53 years, I've wondered where my boy was. James closed his eyes. He died in Laos, ma'am. Spring of 1971. He was killed in action during an extraction mission. He died quickly, bravely. He saved 2 men before he went down. The sound she made wasn't quite crying. It was deeper than that, older. The sound of grief that had been waiting half a century to be acknowledged. Did he suffer? James could have lied, should have lied, but he couldn't. Yes, ma'am, but not for long. I was with him. He wasn't alone. What did he say? At the end, he said to tell his mother he loved her, and that he was sorry he couldn't come home. He wasn't sure if Tommy had actually said that. His memories of that day were fragmented, trauma-scattered, but it was what the old woman needed to hear. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for telling me. Thank you for being with him. Ma'am, there's something else. In May, they're adding Tommy's name to a memorial. At Quantico, it's official recognition. I wanted you to know. If you'd like to attend the ceremony, I can arrange transportation. She was crying openly now. He's going to have a place, a real place, where I can visit. Yes, ma'am. Will you be there at the ceremony? I will. Then I'll be there too. I'll meet you there. And you can tell me about my boy. Everything. I want to know everything. After he hung up, James sat at his kitchen table and cried harder than he'd cried in years. Lily found him like that an hour later. Grandpa, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. For the first time in 50 years, something's actually right. Kenny Williams' daughter was harder to find. She'd been 6 months old when her father deployed, never met him. Grew up with a blank space where a dad should have been and a mother who remarried and tried to forget. James found her through social media, a tool he barely understood with Lily's help. She lived in Chicago, worked as a nurse, had 3 kids of her own. He sent her a message through the platform, got a response 2 days later. Who are you and how did you know my father? They arranged a phone call. She answered with suspicion thick in her voice. I don't know what you want, Mr. O'Donnell, but if this is some kind of scam, it's not a scam. I served with your father in Vietnam. I was his team leader. I was there when he died. Silence. Long enough that James thought she'd hung up. Nobody ever told me how he died, she said finally. Just that he was missing. My mother never talked about him. I don't even have pictures. He looked like you, James said. Same eyes, same jawline. He used to carry a photo of you in his helmet, showed it to everyone, said his daughter was going to grow up and change the world. He never met me. He didn't need to. He loved you anyway. And she was crying now. Why are you telling me this? Why now, after all this time? Because his name is being added to a memorial. Because he's being honored. Because you deserve to know that your father was a hero who saved lives and died protecting his brothers. And because I promised him I'd tell you he loved you. He didn't say that. He couldn't have. He never knew me. He said it anyway. The last thing he said before he died was, tell my baby girl I love her. I've carried those words for 53 years. I'm finally getting to deliver them. The sound she made was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. I never had a father. I grew up thinking he abandoned us, that he chose the war over us. He didn't choose anything except duty and honor. and he thought about you every single day. Trust me on that. They talked for an hour. She asked questions James answered as honestly as he could. Some of the answers hurt, some brought comfort. All of them were necessary. "Will you be at the memorial?" she asked finally. "I will." "Then I'll be there too. I want to meet you. I want to see the man my father trusted, the man he died beside." Carlos Martinez's family was the hardest. His parents were both dead, his siblings scattered. James finally tracked down a younger brother in New Mexico, 79 years old and dying of cancer. "Carlos." The voice on the phone was weak. "You knew Carlos?" "I did. We served together. He was one of the best men I ever knew. He played guitar. Did you know that could make that thing sing? Used to play for us every Sunday before church. He played for us too. In the jungle when we had downtime. Songs from home. Made us remember we were human. I was 10 when he died. He was my hero. I wanted to be just like him. He would have been proud of you. I never did anything worth being proud of. I'm nobody. I'm dying in a trailer park with no money and no legacy." James heard the pain in those words. The lifetime of feeling less than, of living in a dead brother's shadow. "Your brother died protecting people," James said carefully. "He died so others could live. But you know what he told me the night before his last mission? He said he hoped you'd live a quiet life, a peaceful life, a boring life. Because that would mean you didn't have to see what he saw. That's what he wanted for you. Not heroism, just peace." The old man on the other end of the line started crying. "I miss him. I still miss him. I know. I miss him too." Will his name really be on a memorial? It will. Official. Permanent. He'll be remembered. That's good. That's really good. A cough wet and painful. "I don't think I'll make it to May. The doctors say I've got maybe 2 months. James felt something twist in his chest. "Then I'll take pictures. I'll send them to your family. I'll make sure you know it happened." "Thank you. And Mr. O'Donnell, tell me one more thing about Carlos. Something I can hold on to." James thought for a moment. He had this laugh, this big booming laugh that could lift your spirits no matter how bad things got. In the worst firefight in the middle of hell, if Carlos laughed, you felt like maybe you'd make it out alive. He gave people hope just by existing. That sounds like him. That sounds exactly like him. They talked for another 20 minutes before the old man got too tired to continue. James hung up and added his name to a list he was keeping. People to remember, people to honor, people who deserved to know their loved ones mattered. By the time Memorial Day arrived, James had talked to 11 families. Some were grateful, some were angry, some just wanted closure. All of them were coming to the ceremony. The morning of May 26th was clear and warm. Lily drove him to Quantico 3 hours through morning traffic. James wore his brown leather jacket, the same one from the ball with the Navy cross pinned to it. His hands shook the entire drive. "You okay?" Lily asked for the 10th time. "No, but I'm going anyway." The memorial was already crowded when they arrived. Marines in dress blues, veterans in jackets covered with patches, families clutching photos of young men frozen in time. James saw Santos first standing with his wife and 2 adult children. Then Chen, alone, but standing tall. Washington with his grandkids. Castellano leaning on his cane. They found each other like magnets coming together in the middle of the crowd. "We made it," Santos rasped. "Barely," Castellano joked. "Thought my hip was going to give out on the drive." "Your hip's been giving out for 20 years, Chen said. "Stop complaining." They laughed. Old men laughing like boys, like the young soldiers they'd been before the world broke them. General Morrison arrived with an entourage. He shook each of their hands personally, spending time with each one, asking about their health, their families, their lives since the ball. "Gentlemen," he said finally, "there are some people here who want to meet you. The families. Would you be willing?" James looked at the others. They nodded. "Yes, sir, we're ready." Morrison led them to a tent where families had gathered. James saw Tommy's mother immediately tiny, frail in a wheelchair, but her eyes were sharp and clear. Kenny's daughter stood beside her husband, clutching a photo she'd never seen before. Carlos's brother was there too, in a wheelchair himself, oxygen tubes in his nose, but alive. He'd made it after all. The introductions were overwhelming, tearful, painful, beautiful. Tommy's mother grabbed James's hand and wouldn't let go for 15 minutes, just holding on like he was the last piece of her son she'd ever touch. Kenny's daughter asked 100 questions, each one harder than the last. Carlos's brother just stared at him like he was seeing a ghost. "You look like him," the old man whispered. "You have his eyes, that same hardness, that same sadness." "We all have it," James said. "Everyone who made it home. We all carry the same look." The ceremony started at 1100 hours. The crowd fell silent as Morrison stepped to the podium. Behind him stood a black granite wall, freshly carved with 53 new names. "Today," Morrison began, "we honor men who fought in shadows, who died in places that officially didn't exist, who were buried in silence and forgotten by history. Today, we bring them into the light." He read the names, all 53, each one followed by a moment of silence. Each one honored, each one remembered. When he reached Thomas Reeves, James heard Tommy's mother gasp, heard her whisper, "My boy, my sweet boy." When he reached Kenneth Williams, the daughter's husband had to hold her up as her knees gave out. When he reached Carlos Martinez, the brother raised one trembling hand in salute. James stood with his brothers, tears streaming down his face, and listened to 12 names that had lived in his head for 53 years, finally being spoken aloud. Finally being acknowledged. Finally being real. After the names, Morrison called the 5 SOG survivors to the front. "These men," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "carried their brother's memories in silence for half a century. Today they share that burden with us. Today we remember together." The crowd applauded. Not the thunderous ovation from the ball, but something quieter, more reverent. The kind of applause that acknowledged pain as much as courage. James approached the wall, found Tommy's name, traced the letters with one shaking finger. "I kept my promise," he whispered. I told them all. They know you mattered. They know you were loved." He moved to Kenny's name, to Carlos's, to each of his 12 brothers, speaking to them quietly, privately, saying the things he'd carried for 50 years. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you. I'm sorry you didn't get to go home. I'm sorry you missed so much life. But I swear to you, I swear on everything I am, I made your deaths mean something. I lived for you. I remembered for you. I made sure you weren't forgotten." Behind him, Santos was doing the same at different names. Chen, Washington, Castellano. 5 old men talking to ghosts carved in stone, finally able to grieve in public after a lifetime of private pain. Tommy's mother wheeled up beside James. "Thank you," she said simply, "for bringing my boy home. Not his body, but his memory, his name. That's enough. I wish I could have brought him home alive." "I know, but you couldn't. Nobody could. The war took him. But you gave him back to me in the only way possible. You remembered him. You honored him. You told his story." She squeezed his hand with surprising strength. "That's all a mother can ask." Kenny's daughter approached next. "Mr. O'Donnell, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you think he'd be proud of me, my father? Do you think he'd like who I became?" James looked at her. This middle-aged woman who'd grown up without a father, who'd built a life anyway, who'd become a nurse, spent her career healing people, raised 3 good kids. "He'd be incredibly proud," James said. "You became exactly who he hoped you'd be. Someone who helps people, someone who makes the world better. That's all he wanted." She hugged him, then this stranger who carried her father's memory and whispered "thank you" over and over until the words lost meaning and became just sound. The ceremony lasted 2 hours. By the end, James was exhausted. His legs were shaking, his back screaming, but he stayed until every family had been acknowledged, until every name had been honored, until every ghost had been remembered. As people started to leave, Morrison pulled the 5 survivors aside. "Gentlemen, there's one more thing, if you're willing." He led them to a private room. Inside was a film crew. "The Department of Defense wants to document your stories, on camera, for the historical record. It's voluntary, but I'll do it," James said immediately. The others agreed. One by one, they sat in front of the camera and talked, told stories that had been classified for decades, described missions that officially never happened, named friends who died in jungles that Americans weren't supposed to be in. James went last. The interviewer was young, respectful, but clearly out of his depth. "How do you interview a man about hell?" "Tell me about your last mission," the interviewer said. James closed his eyes, opened them, looked directly into the camera. "Spring of 1971. We were extracting a POW from a compound near the Laotian border. 15 of us went in. One of us came out. That's the mission. That's the story." "Can you give more details?" "I can, but I won't. Not all of it. Some things aren't for cameras. Some things aren't for history. Some things you carry alone." "Fair enough. Let me ask something else. How did you survive? What kept you going through 3 years of combat that killed almost everyone else?" James thought for a long moment. "My brothers. That's the simple answer. I survived because they needed me to. Because if I died, who would remember their names? Who would tell their stories? Who would make sure they mattered?" He paused. "I didn't survive for me. I survived for them, and I've been living for them ever since." "Do you have regrets?" "Every single day. I regret every man I lost, every decision that got someone killed, every time I chose the mission over the man. I regret surviving when better people died. I regret coming home to a country that didn't want to hear about the war. I regret 50 years of silence and nightmares and carrying weight I couldn't share." He leaned forward. "But I don't regret serving. I don't regret my brothers. I don't regret fighting for something bigger than myself. Those things I'd do again. What do you want people to know about SOG? About your service? About the men who didn't make it home?" James looked into the camera like he was looking into the eyes of every person who would ever watch this tape. "I want them to know that heroes don't always look like heroes. They're not always young and strong and confident. Sometimes they're old and broken and scared. Sometimes they shake and forget things and need help walking. But that doesn't make them any less heroic. It just makes them human." He paused. "I want them to know that the men who died in places like Laos and Cambodia and North Vietnam, they were real. They had families. They had dreams. They were loved. And they died protecting people they'd never meet in countries they'd never see. That deserves to be remembered. That deserves to be honored." "One last question. After everything you've been through, after all the pain and loss and trauma, was it worth it?" James was quiet for so long, the interviewer started to fidget. Then, "Ask me again in 50 years. Because that's how long it takes to process something like this, to understand what it cost and what it gave you, to figure out if survival is a gift or a curse." He smiled sadly. "But yeah, I think it was worth it. Not because of what I did, but because of who I did it with. My brothers. They made it worth it." The interview ended. The crew packed up. The survivors gathered one more time outside, standing in front of the memorial wall. "So," Castellano said, "same time next year." "If we're alive," Chen replied. "When we're alive," James corrected. "We didn't survive this long to give up now." And they made promises to stay in touch, to call regularly, to support each other through the hard days, to be the family the Marines never gave them back in 71. As James walked back to Lily's car, he stopped and turned, looked at the wall one more time, at the 53 names carved in stone, at the proof that his brothers had existed, had mattered, had been loved. "Rest easy," he whispered. "I've got it from here. You can rest now." Lily took his arm. "Ready to go home, Grandpa?" Yeah, I'm ready." The drive back was quiet. James dozed off somewhere around the second hour, his head against the window, the Navy Cross still pinned to his jacket, catching the afternoon sun. He dreamed, but not of jungles or firefights or friends dying in his arms. He dreamed of Tommy playing basketball in Atlanta, of Kenny holding his baby daughter, of Carlos playing guitar on a Sunday morning. He dreamed of them alive and happy and whole. When he woke up, they were pulling into his driveway. "You were smiling," Lily said, "in your sleep. I don't think I've ever seen you smile in your sleep before." "Good dream," he said simply. "What was it about my brothers, all of them, together again, not in the war, just together, happy?" She helped him inside, made him tea he'd actually drink this time, sat with him while the sun set and the day faded into evening. "Grandpa," she said softly, "thank you." "For what?" "For letting me into this part of your life, for trusting me with your stories, for showing me who you really are. I should have done it years ago. You did it when you were ready. That's what matters." They sat in comfortable silence while darkness fell outside. James's hands still trembled. His back still hurt. The nightmares would still come tonight. But something had shifted. Something had changed. He wasn't carrying the weight alone anymore. He had his brothers, the living ones, who called and texted and promised to meet next year. He had the families who thanked him and told him he'd given them closure. He had Lily, who saw all of him now and loved him anyway. He had a wall with 53 names that proved his memories were real. Captain Kyle Evans called 3 days later. James almost didn't answer. "Sir, I wanted you to know something. I've been going to therapy, twice a week, working through my issues with my father, with anger, with judgment. That's good, son. It's because of you. Because you showed me mercy when I didn't deserve it. Because you taught me that broken people can heal if they're willing to try. I'm glad it helped. There's something else. I've been volunteering at the VA, talking to young veterans, trying to help them avoid the mistakes I made, the mistakes my father made." Evans paused. "I told them about you, about Iron Viper, about what real courage looks like." "You didn't need to do that." "Yes, I did. Because people need to know. They need to understand that heroism isn't always loud, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is keep living when everything in you wants to quit." After Evans hung up, James sat thinking about legacy, about what we leave behind, about how one night of honoring the past can ripple forward and change the future. The weeks became months. Summer arrived. James's health declined slightly. His doctor adjusted medications, talked about assisted living options he ignored, but his spirit improved. He had purpose now. People to call, stories to tell, reasons to wake up each morning. On a warm evening in July, he sat on his front porch, watching the sunset. His phone buzzed. A text from Santos. "Thinking about Tommy today. About that time he tried to cook and nearly set the base on fire. Made me laugh. Made me cry. Made me grateful he existed." James smiled and typed back with his shaking hands. "I remember. He said he was making spaghetti. It was charcoal by the time we got there. Best worst cook in Vietnam. He tried though. That's what mattered. He always tried." They texted back and forth for an hour, trading memories, keeping their brothers alive through words and laughter and love. When James finally put the phone down, the sun had set completely. Stars were beginning to appear. He looked up at them and thought about all the people looking at the same stars. The families he'd called. The brothers he'd served with. The ghosts carved in stone at Quantico. "We did it," he whispered to the night sky. "We made you matter. We made sure you weren't forgotten. That's something. That's enough." Lily found him there an hour later, asleep in his chair, a peaceful expression on his weathered face. She covered him with a blanket and left him there, this old warrior who'd finally found some measure of peace. James O'Donnell lived another 3 years. He made it to 2 more Memorial Days at Quantico. He attended Santos's funeral when Ghost finally lost his battle with cancer. He held Tommy's mother's hand when she died at 95, her last words a whispered, "Thank you for bringing my boy home." He gave interviews to historians and documentaries and students writing papers. He became in his final years the face of Makvisog for a generation that had never heard of them. He told their stories, spoke their names, made sure they were remembered. And when his own time came on a quiet morning in November, 3 years after the ball, he went peacefully. Lily was holding his hand. His last words were barely audible. "Tell them I tried. Tell them I did my best. Tell them I never forgot." "I will, Grandpa. I promise." At his funeral, General Morrison gave the eulogy. Santos sent flowers from his hospital bed. Chen and Washington and Castellano came personally, these old men honoring their old brother one final time. But the surprise was Captain Kyle Evans. He arrived in his dress blues, older now, wiser, with captain's bars soon to be replaced by major's oak leaves. He stood at attention during the service. He saluted the casket with tears streaming down his face. After the burial, he approached Lily. "Your grandfather saved my life," he said simply. "Not physically, but in every way that mattered. He showed me who I needed to be. He gave me a second chance, and I've spent the last 3 years trying to deserve it." "He'd be proud of you," Lily said. "He talked about you sometimes, said you were going to be okay, that you were going to do good things." "I hope so. God, I hope so." The years continued their march. The Vietnam War faded further into history. The old warriors died one by one, until only Chen remained the last of the 5 survivors living in a nursing home in California and telling stories to anyone who would listen. But the wall at Quantico remained. The names stayed carved in stone. Tommy Reeves, Kenny Williams, Carlos Martinez, all 53 brothers, permanent, official, remembered. And sometimes on quiet evenings you could almost hear them, the ghosts of Sog, the men who fought in shadows and died in silence, speaking to each other across decades, telling stories, sharing laughs, being brothers the way they'd always been. Because that's the thing about heroes, they don't die when their bodies fail. They live on in the people who remember them, in the stories that get passed down, in the names carved in stone that promise you existed, you mattered, you were loved. James O'Donnell understood that in the end. Understood that survival wasn't about how long you lived, but about what you did with the time you had. He'd survived 3 years in hell and 53 years of memory. He'd carried 12 ghosts and honored them every single day. He'd forgiven when forgiveness seemed impossible. He'd taught when he could barely speak. He'd loved when love seemed pointless. He'd been Iron Viper, the longest-serving SOG operative in history, the sole survivor of the Vipers, the keeper of names and carrier of ghosts. But more than that, he'd been human, broken and beautiful and brave in all the ways that matter. He'd shown the world that heroism isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up every single time. It's about carrying weight that would crush most people and somehow finding the strength to take one more step. It's about remembering when everyone else forgets. It's about honoring the dead by living fully, completely, honestly. That was his legacy. Not the missions or the medals or the confirmed kills, not the scars or the nightmares or the decades of pain, but the simple fact that he survived with his humanity intact. That he came home from hell and chose mercy over vengeance, forgiveness over hatred, remembrance over forgetting. He showed us all that the deepest courage is often the quietest, that some legends walk among us unseen until honor calls their name again, that the men and women who've seen the worst of humanity can still choose to embody the best of it. And in the end, that choice to be better, to do better, to remember better, that's what separates heroes from survivors and legends from ghosts. James O'Donnell made that choice every single day for 56 years after coming home from Vietnam. And that made all the difference.